Hello, fellow birders. My name is Dennis Kania. I've got some exciting news to share with you today. The latest edition of the DuPage County Checklist is now available and ready for distribution. So we're going to take a closer look at some of the changes that took place in that new edition. On the DuPage Birding Club education channel, we'll be discussing all things bird related. As I mentioned, today we'll be talking about the new county checklist, 6th edition. So county bird populations have been changing a lot over the last 10 years, and they'll continue to change. Basically, when I try to update this checklist, it's going to reflect more or less a snapshot of what the current trends are and what we anticipate will be happening in the future. So it's more about what's happening in the future than what has currently or recently taken place. Unfortunately, there's a lot of data that we can rely on. With eBird sightings being recorded all the time, that gives us some historical data so that we can look at trends and try to determine what's going to happen in the future. So one of the major changes that's taken place this edition is that we're no longer going to be supplying an accidental species list. There just isn't enough room for that anymore. That list has grown considerably over the last 10 years, and there's just not room anymore. So the checklist now, as it stands, has 268 species of birds that can be observed in DuPage County on a regular basis. And if you play your cards right and have a little bit of luck, you can actually see all of those species in 1 year. They should be here. The closest I've ever come is 241 species. That was about 20 years ago. I had some free time that year and devoted a lot of it to birding, so I was able to come up with quite a few species. Another major change that we've made in this checklist version is that we're departing from the AOU checklist of taxonomy order, and we're now moving to Clemens' checklist of the world and using that taxonomy order. And this will put us better aligned with other resources such as eBird. In a threefold format, there was never really enough room to have columns for every month, and that is what I'd really ideally like to get to, but we're just never going to be able to do that. But I also felt that a 4-season format just didn't seem like enough. So I decided long ago to take spring and fall seasons and split them both in half. And likewise, the summer season, we've split that into 2 parts, one being the actual breeding part of the season, and then the second reflecting post-breeding wandering and early migration of things like shorebirds. So in the end result, we have 7 columns to choose from. And I think a lot of this makes sense if you think about the fact of what spring looks like to you. Think about what March looks like compared to May. Considerably different. Same thing in the fall. If you compare September to November, considerably different. So I think it's logical to go ahead and split those seasons. There's an 8th column that we have in the checklist, and that serves 2 purposes. If there's an asterisk in that column, that means that this is a breeding bird species, and there's quite a few of those for the county. If you also find a V in that column, that means that the abundance ratings that you see for that species reflect what the abundance would be during invasion years. And an invasion year is an example, something like white-winged crossbill. We don't typically see white-winged crossbills in the county, but every now and then we'll have what we call an invasion year, where all of a sudden they move down from the north and we have many more records of them than we typically would. So the abundance ratings you would see for white-winged crossbill would reflect what it would be like in one of those invasion years. When I developed the checklist, I tried to come up with abundance ratings that were more or less quantitative in nature. And so, if we look at a couple of these that are fairly common, it's likely to find in small numbers on most days in suitable habitat. So you have a reasonably good chance of finding that bird on most days. Uncommon is just one step down from that. And so you can still find them in small numbers, but now it's more likely you're finding them in 1 in 4 days, let's say. And it just keeps getting progressively more difficult. Rare is seldom found in any numbers, even in suitable habitat. And so that kind of gives you a flavor for what the quantitative values are. It's in number of days, it's in number of individuals that you can find in a certain season on a given day. And I think that works out fairly well. So here's a little snippet from the actual checklist, and so you can see what the format of the checklist is. And if you look at all those abundance ratings, there's many of those for all of the 268 species, and I ended up changing roughly 282 of those abundance ratings when we moved from the 5th edition to the 6th edition. So there's a lot of scrutiny going on of existing data, and again, trying to predict where these trends are leading us for the next 10 years. We ended up dropping 4 species from the list. 3 of those were due to inactivity. We're just not seeing those birds anymore. And then a 4th species was lost because Stayer's gulls were lumped in with Iceland gulls. So we lost that species. On the upside, we did add 9 species, which we elevated from the accidental list to the regular occurring list because we are seeing them more frequently. So here are the species that were dropped. Upland sandpiper is a species that you can probably make an argument to keep on the list, but again, we're trying to not only look at recent past, but we're also looking towards the future. And I think this bird is trending downward more, and with habitat degradation in the area, it's not likely we're going to be seeing these birds much longer. So we're taking that one out of the list. We can always change that. This bird or this checklist is reviewed every 10 years. So there's a chance this bird can come back. Thayer's gull is gone forever, unless science proves that this earlier split is worthwhile. Common tern, we're just not seeing those in the interior counties anywhere near as much as we used to, and you're more likely to see that maybe on the Chicago lakefront. Evening grosbeak is really a great bird. I've had several encounters with those in the county, but not in a very, very long time. And as far as I know, we probably haven't had them on a Christmas count in the county for better than 25 years. But here are some of the birds that we've added. Trumpeter swan is a bird that's definitely on the increase in our county, and we're getting more regular recordings of white-winged scoter, black scoter. Again, these are birds that we've elevated. We are getting more records, but it's uncertain really how these birds will trend in the future. I'm guessing that we'll get more records, but if it turns out that that's not the case, then there's a good chance these birds would drop off. Eurasian collared dove seems to be spreading more and more across the country, and I know we're getting records in the county now, so it's just a matter of time before those become more regular as well. Whooping crane is a bird that's being seen in Illinois more frequently than it was in the past. A lot of that has to do with the birds that are migrating out of Wisconsin. And this photo that I'm showing here is actually our first record of whooping crane at Fermilab. And it was just taken by a photographer, Elizabeth Pector, and she just happened to mention to me that, she had a nice picture of a whooping crane flying over Fermilab. Well, my ears went up right away when I heard that. This was actually our 291st species for Fermilab, so that was quite significant. Willet, again, I think we're getting more records now, so that's why we bumped that one up from the accidental list, and whether or not that continues, we'll just have to wait and see. A few more species that we have added. Pileated woodpecker certainly is becoming more common in the county, and we have breeding populations in a couple different places. Certainly at the Morton Arboretum, they've been breeding there for a while, and there are site records for several other places besides that. Elson's Hill, I've heard them there. I know a lot of people have seen them there. I've had them at McDowell Grove. It wouldn't surprise me if we have them in places like Waterfall Glen. Lark sparrow is making an increase, and we're getting more records of that bird around. Blue grosbeak is a breeding bird now, and breeding in a few places in the county. We've had them breeding at Fermilab. They're certainly breeding at the Morton Arboretum. I've had evidence of breeding at Hidden Lake. So that's another bird. I'm sure there are other places in the county as well, but it's another bird that was worth bringing up from the accidental list and including them in the main body. So we've got a few species also that I had to give some consideration to, and these are species that are just barely hanging on. Things like sanderling, western sandpiper, lesser blackback gull, glaucous gull, loggerhead shrike, and the yellow-headed blackbird. And probably out of this whole bunch, everybody would really hate to see us lose our yellow-headed blackbirds, but they've really been trending downward for quite a long time, and they've moved around the county. Some of the hot spots a long time ago were places like McKee Marsh, Then they ended up moving up to Pratt's Wayne Woods. We had them in Pate Phillips State Park for a while, but there are very, very few records coming from there now. So I think this is a bird that could work its way off of the list. The gulls that we have here are species that once we closed up all of our landfills, our gull varieties really started to diminish. And on extremely rare occasions, we have these birds showing up in a few places. We still get a record or two at Fermilab of lesser blackback gull and glaucous gull, but it's very likely that these birds could fall off the list as well. Western sandpiper and sanderling, all of our shorebird habitat is so limited in migration that it's really difficult to get these birds. And there's a good chance, unless we get some more records, those birds will be falling off. Loggerhead shrike is bred in a few places in the county. We've had them breeding at Fermilab. We've had them breeding out near Springbrook. And those birds are not breeding, as far as I know, anywhere in the county now. And it's a bird that's across its range is in decline. So chances are we're not going to be seeing these birds around our county too much longer. So thanks for taking the time to view this video. Hopefully we've given you some bird food for thought. And I hope you'll join us again in the future as we explore all things bird related.